I am pro-vax. I genuinely have that position, but not mandate. But I'm annoyed at the fact that why do I have to keep saying it? It's just none of anybody's business, right? It's like, boy, because YouTube gets upset if we do a segment about a vaccine side effect, unless we both say we're pro-vax. Well, screw that. What if we're not pro-vax? We are pro-vax, but what if we're not? We should be able to say that and then still do this segment. This is America. All right, let's get to it. So you get your first shot, Pfizer, in May, and it went fine, as I understand. No side effects. And then take us to the second shot.
Yeah, exactly. So, my mom actually got vaccinated. I think it was in March or April. So she got it in that time frame. And then a lot of our neighbors who are nurses and doctors, like we live in a nice neighborhood now. There's a lot of people that are getting vaccinated early on, kind of working in the hospital system. So we talked to them. Everyone had no problems so far. It was great. And so my girlfriend and I decided to make that decision. We wanted to kind of do our part, went in, got the shots, and the first dose was no problem at all. And we walked out of there and it was like a good feeling, it felt like we were one step closer to being through this whole ordeal with COVID. And so it was a good feeling. And I was just reflecting on that yesterday of how nice it felt to go in. They draw basically this much clear fluid. They inject it in your arm, you're 15 seconds, you're out the door. And I remember thinking like, I wonder why there's such a huge fuss about this. And I was naive to the fact that there wasn't, it wasn't even approved. I didn't actually know that. I just kind of heard what they were saying on the television. They said, do your part, get vaccinated, it's safe and effective. You're going to need it at some point. And I was like, okay, let's do it. It must not be that big of a deal. And then come to find out, the second dose, I hadn't had any side effects after the first dose. Second dose, I went in, and right upon them administering it, I tasted it. And it was kind of like a saline solution taste. It was really a weird feeling. But as soon as he injected it, I just felt my whole body kind of flush, and I tasted it really bad. And that didn't go away for a few hours. Like I still had the remnants of it just in my mouth. And I was like, man, this is so weird. And I started kind of looking online, trying to figure out, is this a normal side effect, or, is this normal? I asked the guy, he's like, I don't know, I haven't heard anyone talk about that yet. So after that, about 2 weeks after my second dose, I started to have some weird heart palpitations, and basically just throughout the day, I'd be sitting on the couch or, working on the computer, and my heart would just kind of run away from me. And what I mean by that is I'd be at a resting heart rate, maybe around 60, just feel really normal. My heart rate would go up to like 110, 120, and I'd get kind of flushed, and then I'd go sit down or lay down, and I'd be able to calm it down. And it was to the point where I actually just completely cut out all caffeine. I cut out a lot of the sugar, like anything in my diet that I thought could maybe be causing just my heart to kind of be overactive. And so that was going on for about a month, kind of off and on. And then July 12th, I went for my first bike ride really in a few weeks, because I think I rode 2 weeks after my shot. Then I started to feel a little bit funny, had 2 more weeks of just downtime, went for another bike ride. And then that's when I had the big episode with my heart kind of running away from me. And I ended up in the ER the first time.
Whoa. Can you describe that?
Yeah. So, my girlfriend and I went on a bike ride, and just super normal. And we were climbing for maybe 5 to 8 minutes. And usually a heart rate will get up when you're climbing, obviously, so it's not a big deal. But I started to feel kind of just like flushed and a little bit sick, and I wasn't sure what was going on. And one of our friends that was with us was like, dude, you don't look good. Like, what's going on? And I was like, man, I don't feel good. I don't feel normal. I don't know what's going on. So we went back down to the van, and I laid down, and I was like deep breathing, just kind of resting, trying to figure out what was going on. And I couldn't get my heart rate to come down below 130, and it just kind of stuck there. And so the way I was measuring that is I had a, Garmin activity monitor. And so I was looking at that, and I couldn't get it to come down. And so we ended up heading to the hospital. And I sat there for 3.5 hours in the waiting room, and was just telling them like, something's up with my heart. I don't know what's going on. And, I think earlier that week or a day or two prior, I had read the big press release where it said heart issue, or, pericarditis, myocarditis possible with the vaccine. And it said mRNA vaccine. So I just kind of cataloged that. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that was a possibility when I got the shot. And then now I'm like, oh, it's interesting that in Europe, especially, they're seeing a lot of people have issues in young men with their heart. And so when I went into the hospital, I said, I don't know what's going on with my heart. I think it may be a reaction to the vaccine, because I got the Pfizer vaccine, about a month ago, and I've never had heart issues before, so I'm just kind of ruling things out. I'm like, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but they are linking a heart issue. I'm having this new heart issue after getting the shot. And the guy was super dismissive about it and just said, no, you're not. You're totally fine. He's like, have you tried pooping lately? I was like, yeah, I don't think it's that. He's like, sometimes when you have a tachycardia and you like bear down, like you need to poop, it'll reset your heart rate. And I was like, I don't think that's what's going on, man. I think there's something else going on. So anyways, long story short, I was in the hospital, I think 6 to 7 hours that day, just in the waiting room. They did a EKG. So they monitored everything. And, you know, they're basically like, we don't know what's going on. Our best bet is just give you an anti-inflammatory, see if that can help. So they gave me a big injection of Toradol, which kind of helped just calm everything down. And then, it was interesting because then the doctor came in and was talking to me about how he said, hey, when I was in medical school, I had a lot of workload. I was really stressed out and I got put on antidepressants and kind of anti-anxiety medication, and it really helped me a lot. And I think that would be beneficial for you too. And, you know, I was like, thank you, but you know, no, thank you. I think this is just a heart thing I'm dealing with. I'm only
anxious now because my heart is racing and I'm worried about my heart.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that was kind of funny to me looking back, is just the fact that there's a lot of people now that are going through the same experience, that are all being diagnosed early on as like an anxiety attack or an anxiety or depression issue. And I just think it's funny that all these people made it through the pandemic, that whole year of 2020, you know, without any anxiety or depression issues. And then you get this vaccine and now you're anxious and that's why you're having these issues.
Well, here's the other question, Kyle. When you were telling your story, I thought, okay, so I'm 51 now, but when I was 27, I did have racing heart rate and I went to the doctor and they diagnosed a heart murmur. And I was like, maybe he's got a heart murmur. But you had the tests that I had that showed a heart murmur. Like they looked at your heart and they haven't found that.
Looked at it. Yeah, they looked at it really briefly on the EKG. And then that was kind of enough for them to say, you know, your heart rate's really high. Like my resting heart rate, even in the hospital bed, was like 110. And so then I finally, after the Toradol, it kind of just like knocked me out almost and got me to be super relaxed. And then my heart rate dropped to 90 something. And he's like, look, you're normal. And I was like, no,
I'm on drugs.
My resting heart rate. Yeah, I'm like, my resting heart rate's usually 55. And so I told him this is almost double my normal heart rate, you know, and it might look weird because I'm an athlete. So it doesn't look like it's really, really, really elevated. But for me, it's almost double my normal heart rate. And that was, I think, one of the things that was the struggle point, is if you're a healthy young person, it's really difficult for them to kind of diagnose a lot of things, it seems like, just because you don't fit the norms. And so if you're having a problem, they're like, well, it must not be that bad. But it was enough for me to feel like I was going to, you know, potentially have a heart attack or have something happen. And
but that's exactly the group that is getting this, the heart side effects, is young men, and also to a lesser extent some women, but it's young people. It's people in your age group, over 12 and under
the
40.
React 19 group. So there's a big support group that kind of pulled me in throughout the past few months, and they said that the average age of the vaccine injury is 33 years old, and that was before they approved it for the 5 to 12 year olds. So it is affecting younger people disproportionately, which is kind of why I think this is such a good conversation that needs to be had, because if it's affecting younger people who are theoretically at lower risk of COVID, but then the older people who are at higher risk of COVID are not being as affected, then, I mean, that's something we should look into, right? Like if you're going to push people to be mandated to get this when they're at very, very, very low risk of COVID, and then they're at a higher risk of vaccine injury versus the older people who maybe are at a really high risk of COVID and a low risk of vaccine injury. And, you know, when you ask those questions of like, why is this happening? The doctors aren't even really allowed to discuss it or talk about it together or in public, because it's looked at as a taboo subject. And a lot of the doctors I'm working with and talking with now, they're basically saying there's a few components at play, but one of the big things that could be happening is an autoimmune issue. And basically the more robust your immune response, the more likely you are to have this reaction.